Hey guys, it's Caleb. Kind of an announcement, but really more of a question before we start this episode. June and I have been approached by actually a couple of different podcast networks, and they want us to join. The advantages of that are pretty clear. You know, we get to help growing the show with marketing, crossover collaborations with some of the other network members and things of that nature. But the potential downside is that it requires us to advertise. And while that would help us financially, you know, June and I are a bit wary of that because we always want to make sure you, the listener, comes first no matter what. In the past, we've asked this question and overwhelmingly you guys have been okay with it. But we just wanted to check one more time. So we'd like to hear from you, positive or negative, in the Discord, on Blue Sky, mail at killthecomputer.com. You can email us there. Just let us know, positively or negative. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to another episode of Kill the Computer. Today I've been practicing non-terrorist language. I've been very good. When I say I want to kill politicians, I don't say in Minecraft because that's the FBI tracks that. They know when you're saying it in Minecraft.
Excited to announce the next rebrand of the show, Kiss the Computer.
Yeah, that's a very violent name. We're probably going to get designated as like Antifa terrorists just for the name alone. So keep an eye out on your feed. We're going to have new graphics and everything. Caleb, how are you doing today?
Just finished wandering the desert for 50 years watching that Seattle Mariners Tigers baseball game last night. We came out on top. We did it, read it. That was fun. But I am very tired today. I stayed up late watching that, so yeah.
No, it felt like I didn't watch the game, but the way that all social media was reacting to it made it feel like it was like the holy grail of all sports games in history.
I made fun of, they have a player, Kerry Carpenter, who I made fun of, and I have to, Josh Borman, if you're listening, I'm sorry, man. I think he was a little upset. He was destroying us all series, just the only guy that was really getting us, and I said, "See you in hell, bitch." KKK, Kerry Carpenter, or whatever. And Josh was like, "Come on, man."
I saw that, but it was to a deleted post, so I didn't know what the context was.
I had baseball madness, playoff madness. You can't blame me.
It just comes over you, yeah.
Yeah.
And today we have the independent journalist and the premier talking about I always fucking forget how it goes. NSPM-7 investigator Ken Klippenstein.
Hey, all good to be with you. And yeah, you got it right, NSPM-7.
Okay, I don't know why. I always want to say like NPSM. I don't know. It's too, they got to simplify it. They just have to, they just need to be like, this is the fascist act or something. That would be a lot easier to understand and say. And like, this, like it would sound a lot more urgent.
So I feel like back in the day, the Patriot Act, like, okay, I can remember that, right?
It's one thing the national security,
horrifying, but
that's one thing the national security state is really good at. For all the intelligence failures and things they get wrong, they are good at burying things in extremely boring sounding boilerplate and acronyms.
Yeah, which is weird because they just changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War, which doesn't really seem to like that. I mean, it's pretty explicit. Like, all right, like you're just you're pushing away the pretext of like, this is for defense, right? Wink, wink. They're not really doing that for that anymore, but for this they are. Like no one has talked about this. I think like there's people online.
What is it?
Have talked
first of all?
Yeah, I like still truly don't know. I do kind of know, but I truly don't still. Yeah, what is it?
Okay, so in a nutshell, National Security Presidential Memorandum 7 refers to a directive by the president to basically all of federal law enforcement that they need to prioritize a new form of domestic terrorism as described by a number of what are called indicators. And in the story I wrote on it, I encourage people to go look at it because I break down what the significance of each of these terms is, because again, they rely on this national security speak that is not always easy to understand. But in a nutshell, if you look at those indicators, things like anti-Christianity, anti-traditional family, anti-Americanism, like these are really broad indicators that would describe like half the country.
Making a joke about the nuclear family could designate you a terrorist under this, is like from what I understand.
Literally. So here's the thing. So throughout the document, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and attempts to downplay and say that, oh, this is something Trump says, and Trump says a lot of things which don't happen. And that's true. But I said earlier, this is a presidential memorandum. That's distinct from an executive order. There's been a lot of misreporting claiming that it's an executive order. That's not true. Executive orders, yes, there are over 200 of those. Many of them are kind of small bore, symbolic to the extent that they do anything. It's kind of instructing the government about day-to-day operations, things like removing transgender from LGBT, stuff like that. Like, not things that are unimportant, but it's like stuff that's more day-to-day operations.
They're scraping shit like text off walls and shit. Like that's what a lot of it is. Like the USAID. I mean, they did dismantle USAID, but But a presidential memorandum, they're often classified or otherwise secret. Just as one example, we're talking about NSPM-7 now. NSPM-6 is classified. We don't know what it is. You can go and look at it. There's just a blank spot on the White House page for what that is. Ooh. So that gives you a sense of the intrinsic secrecy around this, which doesn't apply to executive orders. And they're basically squeaking. Sorry, who signed the 6th? Who was that under? Was that under Trump as well?
Yep, that's Trump as well. So since these are presidential memorandums, it's the president signing them, but it's basically instructing the entirety of the executive branch. Here's a new set of priorities that we want to sort of restructure ourselves on and focus on for the remainder of the administration.
Can I ask a question? Because with executive orders, there's no, like, the president can just sign it and can say whatever, but then the next incoming president could just immediately like rescind it. How is that different from a presidential memorandum?
I don't know that that's different for memoranda, but it's more just the scope of what it is that they accomplish. So just to give you an historical example, during Jimmy Carter, there was a classified memorandum on the nuclear strategy, basically had us beef up our nuclear strategy vis-a-vis the then USSR. And when that came out, there were protests and huge backlash to it. For obvious reasons, people don't want to risk nuclear war. And so, and it was such a dramatic shift from the footing that the U.S. government had been on previously. That gives you a sense of how much of a shadow this can cast across the federal government. Yeah. And in this case, within 2 days, Pam Bondi had issued a executive order citing this memorandum throughout as like legal justification for it, creating a anti-ICE crimes task force, which allows what's special about this, and I think goes beyond a lot of these National Guard deployments that we've seen, is it activates what are called joint terrorism task forces. Most of these were established after 9/11 in all 50 states, represents thousands of federal agents, including FBI and other federal officers. It empowers them to go and act on this set of indicators that I was describing before to prevent, and this is directly quoted from the memorandum, prevent crimes before they have happened. And that's inherent.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's inherent in a counterterrorism approach. Unlike ordinary crime fighting, where you find a crime has been committed, you go find evidence, you bring it to a court. In counterterrorism, which is the whole point of the memorandum, cracking down on the supposed domestic terrorism, they list Charlie Kirk's murder as one example. You are trying to preempt attacks. Well, how do you preempt something? How do you stop something that hasn't happened? You have to try to predict it. And how do you predict it? You're basically looking at speech. So this is an attack on speech. It's saying certain forms of speech that we've just, in that list that I was referring to, just 3 of like 12 of the different ones, these are indicators of these future crimes. And there's no evidence cited for that. They're indicators, but that's what it is. Right. And that's what these that's what these joint terrorism task forces are going to be looking for, is saying who's saying these things, because that might tell us that they're going to commit a crime.
Why do you think they made this one public? Because the only reason, so I've been thinking about this for a while. The only reason at first that I was thinking like that they made this one public is that they were maybe not going to act too much on these things, but they want to scare people. Because I feel like they've been trying to do that a lot in this administration so far, the way that they have been like posting, something that was also very strange to me is that it just seems like Kash Patel and the FBI posts all of the evidence as they find it to Twitter first, which is like the craziest thing. It's like, I found a bullet, I got to show my 2 trillion audience, and Donald Trump will retweet it because it has a word, it says Antifa on it or something. Like, it's weird that like they've been acting this way, like almost too transparent in a way that makes no sense, for any political strategical reason. Yeah,
but that's not specific to this. As you were saying, they've done that in all kinds of ways. It's actively undermining their case. I mean, in the case of the accused gunman in Manhattan, who the DOJ says killed the CEO of United Health Group, Luigi Mangione. There are questions about it hurting the prosecution, how they've handled the ridiculous perp walk and all of this prejudicial stuff. So it's like, I don't know how much they're thinking about that. So
I don't think they are. Yeah.
Right. In the case of the Trump administration, I get the impression that Trump himself is kind of contemptuous of the national security system generally, and that has certain bad things, and there are some good things. And one good thing is that I think he just doesn't take that system as seriously as other people would. Because if you look at the memoranda 1 through 6 or 1 through 5, even though 6 is classified, the rest are open. And if you go through them, not all of them are scary. So it's like, it might just be the attitude of the administration that they're like, we don't want to go through this whole system because secrecy slows things down and it's difficult to get your message out. There's probably some level of messaging to the public what's going on. But one thing I want to stress is even if it doesn't get to the point of these joint terrorism task forces kicking down doors and arresting people, there's a whole continuum of effects, of knock-on effects from this. And we're already seeing some of them, which in one case, I didn't cover everything in the memorandum, trying to give people a general nutshell idea of it. But another part mentions directing the Treasury Department to start looking at cash flows to and from nonprofit groups that they think are backing these things. Because the Trump administration is convinced, and based on my conversations with people close to them, they really believe this. I thought it was just rhetoric at first. They really think that shadowy forces are financing all these things. They don't think that it's just organic.
They really think that they're going to find Antifa headquarters under the desert in the Mojave or something like that.
Just sorry, this is a total aside, and I apologize, but it was so fucking funny. I have to bring it up. The guy it made it to Newsmax. It was the guy who infiltrated Antifa HQ. Did you see that?
The British guy. It was it was in the UK, right? Am I thinking of the same one where he walks into a punk venue or something like that? Is it that guy?
Yeah. Portland. Maybe we're talking about two different ones, but yeah, it was literally just a punk venue, and there's just what you'd think if you go to a skate punk show or something like that. He's like, I can't believe I'm fucking inside. I made it. And they just credulously run this shit. What do you mean Antifa? If that's HQ, that rickety bullshit, really? There's nothing in it. It's an abandoned building.
Yeah, it's you can hear music in the background. There's a concert actively happening. It's
you
these
can't
people
afford to tune your guitars, man. Jesus Christ.
It is very wild that these people live in different worlds. And it sounds like even the Trump administration, I had thought, and I still sort of do think so, that there's people actively in the administration pulling strings to sort of create this reality around Donald Trump, because I don't think he's all there anymore, or no, I mean, hasn't been for a long time. But people like Stephen Miller, I don't think he truly thinks that there's Antifa cells being activated across the country. I think he's trying to construct a narrative for and this is all speculative. Of course, we can never truly know what these people all believe. But because I feel ultimately it's Stephen Miller and his close allies' goal to really clamp down on free speech, especially from the left, and sort of destroy the left systematically, take on maybe DSA, maybe different activist groups that they view as active threats to
you guys both have touched on something that is, I think, a common pattern in both Trump administrations, where it's a lot of bluster. So they'll say, hey, wait a second, I can't critique, the Christian family values, or they'll come get me. And then, Republicans can have plausible deniability and say, well, that's not true. Nobody's going to do that. In the meantime, they're going to be dismantling, NGOs and nonprofits and stuff like that.
Right.
So
exactly. That's a really important point. So I think that media will tend to look at this stuff and be like, well, the maximalist thing of them kicking down doors, that hasn't happened, probably won't. But what they're missing is what has already happened, which is often more subtle. So it's kind of like the Jimmy Kimmel, I always get my late night Jimmys mixed up. They're
all the same. They're the same Jimmys.
Whichever one it was. The effect of that on other late night comics is going to be, well, look at the shitstorm that they found themselves in when they did this. Maybe I don't want to make this joke that I was on the fence about to begin with. So with the nonprofits, I've had people at, pretty big nonprofits contact me and just describe to me how their legal counsel is kind of telling them, well, we have a new risk matrix now. We've got to adopt different practices around how we talk about X, Y, and Z, because we're under a magnifying glass now. And there have been, I reported on some of it. Since my story, there have been over a dozen major law firms based in Washington advising clients, hey, this is serious. Nonprofit groups, start behaving differently so that you don't run afoul of this law. So there's going to be some measure of self-censorship that's already happening.
What kinds of nonprofit groups are we talking here?
Well, that's what's interesting. So in the memorandum, it is fairly careful not to say Democrats explicitly, but all of the cultural indicators that they cite, like, anti-Christianity, anti-traditional family, like that can be applied to anything.
Yeah.
And right after they signed it in the Oval Office ceremony, Stephen Miller, who is the Homeland Security advisor, made abundantly clear that this whole thing is about the quote radical left, the Democrat, and then if you look at those law firms and then Trump's own comments about what would one example be? George Soros, for instance, and saying that he wants to apply RICO statutes to him. Like, they're not even talking about like leftist, like you mentioned DSA. It's not even just that. This is solidly like mainstream liberalism at this point.
They're talking about the same conspiracies that they've had since I was a child, essentially. This same couple of people.
And those are the groups that these big fancy law firms, they're not representing the DSA. They're representing the George Soroses of the world. And they're telling them, hey, take this seriously. And those companies are going to be listening. I mean, I know from just personally that they're listening to that already. So this is affecting how people talk about things. And that's really concerning in itself, even if it's more subtle than like I was saying before, the maximalist concern about arrests.
Yeah, and like part of all of this is like, are they going to do the maximalist thing? I don't know. I really hope not. But I mean, the self-censorship thing is at least low key what they're going for, and a lot of people will give into it because it is scary. Like I think we've also sort of seen a lot of that happen so far, even on a much lower level too. Like the way a lot of these like Trump freaks have been hopping on like trying to dox and ruin people's lives on Twitter. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these people recently. There's been like roving gangs of like maniacs who have just been finding a new leftist every day to just like try to ruin the life of. And it's like so many people are like just abandoning Twitter. People that have been on there as long as like 2010 at this point, because it's like it's becoming a liability because these people just relish in getting people to self-censor, and it's really not a great time to like, even irregardless of the NSPM-7 delegation, which is really fucking bad. It's also just like a really like we all just see each other too much, and we are so connected. Like our personal lives and our online lives are just like so connected in a way where they're just I mean they're intertwined entirely. So it's a weird time to be online where like you can make an offhand joke 3 years ago, and then Stephen Miller might see it because of a groyper tagging him on Twitter, and then he wants to like put you in jail because you said that the nuclear family.
JD Vance is literally replying to people and getting into Twitter fights, probably right now.
He dunked on Hell Dude like a couple of months ago. Like, why is the vice president arguing with Hell Dude? Like, what is this? This is so stupid.
Yeah, that's the irony of this admin. I remember during the Obama administration thinking, how cool would it be to have like an online president? And then of course the monkey's paw curled, and we got our first online president in Donald Trump.
And it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's the worst. This is the worst president I've ever. Yeah. No, whoever like I'm fully sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I guess, how are we going to find what the scope of this is? How does this stuff typically get out? Because obviously there's whistleblowers, but is it just going to be like they're going to use this as a pretext in lawsuits or litigation, and it's going to come out in discovery? Or how are we going to find out what they're doing, what the scope of this actually is?
Well, again, it's not this binary of do they do the maximalist thing or not. We've already seen the anti-ICE task force created on this, citing this as its basis, and then the nonprofits. But as for how they'll go about these law enforcement investigations, it sounds like you're asking, that will be cited in court records if it's brought to court. But part of the problem is this could predicate investigations, which could lead them to things that they might prosecute unrelated to terrorism. So, for example, say they decide to look at some group or even an individual, and they find out that you didn't file your taxes right. And then that becomes an issue. I mean, you can imagine all kinds of things that they might stumble across that they wouldn't have been looking at otherwise, because they were able to predicate this investigation on these indicators, which are just like half the country, like we said. And predication is an important part of law enforcement. It's actually not trivial for the FBI to be able to open a case, because you have to meet certain, it wasn't, I guess I should say, because it's understood that once you have the federal bureau looking at somebody, that's a lot of power to bring against. So there's got to be some kind of barrier to them looking at, there has to be some evidence that something has happened for them to look at you. Not so in the counterterrorism approach. And that's part of why you're seeing this administration just hammer at this idea that all of the opposition are terrorists, because that allows them to take the gloves off and look at things. So to your question, how will we know if it's happened? You'll likely, I mean, there's a Treasury approach, but I would say you'd see these joint terrorism task forces arresting, I don't know, like political opposition, stuff like that. That might be something to watch for. Part of the problem with this is that Trump is taking advantage of a national security apparatus that had been laid out before he came into office. I mean, this stuff was created after 9/11 to prevent the next 9/11. Mm-hmm. And now you have the Trump administration, just to give you one example, take what's called the Terrorist Screening Center, which maintains the watch list. Kash Patel took some selfies of himself there, meeting with the director. They picked a new director and they changed the name. It's no longer the Terrorist Screening Center. It is the Threat Screening Center.
Jesus
and the
Christ.
explanation for it is interesting. They said, well, we have a broader range of threats now, so we had to update the name. So there's all of these signs that they're expanding. And as sources have told me, they're expanding the domestic terrorist watch list. They anticipate that it'll double.
Yeah,
over the
you had a
next
piece
year
on
or so.
Truth Out that you'd said that in the coming months it's going to double from like 5,000 to that would be like 10,000 people on this watch list. By this classification, I would imagine probably 90% of the people listening to this show, or tens of millions of Americans, could be on this list. So what are they really like? What do you think that they're actually? Who's actually going to make the list?
So the FBI maintains like the master list, and it draws on intelligence from all kinds of agencies across the federal government, from Department of Homeland Security sub-agencies, including ICE. People forget this. ICE has its own internal FBI. It's called Homeland Security Investigations, and tens of thousands of people. Again, a post 9/11 creation, said at the time to prevent the next 9/11, and we find ourselves now at a moment where formally what's called the global war on terror is drawn to a close. We still look at ISIS and groups like Al Qaeda, but it's much less of a focus. So they've drawn that down, and
now we're the terrorists. It feels like, and now they're trying to make us all the terrorists.
The agencies have to find a reason to exist, and here comes Trump. Oh, we've got this domestic terrorism threat. How about that? And what's frightening is that when you look at the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, part of the reason you see all of these National Guardsmen deployed, and you'll see these comical videos of them just wandering around, like picking up trash or like doing just like stuff that any community service person could do. Part of that is because the military is restrained from engaging directly in law enforcement under posse comitatus. So I think that is a good example of a theater display that's kind of like Trump trying to look tough, but they can't really. He would have to declare an insurrection or something really extreme like that to be able to lift the posse comitatus limits. But in the case of the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, they can directly engage in law enforcement. So basically, it's a kind of ingenious move by the administration to find federal assets that they can send in without the approval of a governor or state legislature, but who are not restrained by posse comitatus.
So this might be off topic. I genuinely actually don't know how this relates. I think it probably does. Stephen Miller, I believe, was on CNN a couple of days ago, and he let slip that Trump has plenary authority, and he just stopped talking and pretended. What does that mean?
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, what does that mean? I tried to look into plenary authority, and it just sounds like that Stephen Miller at least thinks or believes or stated that Trump has unlimited power with no limitations. I don't really know what that means in this context. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert, but my sense is that is their own interpretation of like what's been called unitary executive theory, namely that basically all executive branch authority resides within the president, and he can, and they've invoked this. And like when Trump removed all the classified documents, he said like, my act of internally thinking that it's declassified it because I was the president. So it's like, it gets, I don't know that poses like a specific threat beyond what like years of, conservative jurisprudence had, but it's an expression of how seriously they take this idea that Trump is really the ultimate boss for everything, all questions, executive branch.
Yeah, and I've been debating, going back and forth, what part of this is theater, what part of this is real, and maybe it's just too early to know what is real. I mean, a lot of this, I mean, I think the NSPM-7 designation happened 2 weeks ago, and I know, like, I mean, what I will say, something that has really shockingly surprised me in a really awful way, is it feels like they've really ramped up how quickly they are leaning into, like, I guess what I would call state-sponsored, like, terrorism against, like, communities. I feel like they didn't really do that in Trump's first term until, like, the last year, and it really only manifested in a real way during the Black Lives Matter protests near the end of his term, where he would, like, send military and all of these different presences into the streets. And of course they had ICE everywhere as well, but not so much in an explicitly, like, in our face way, not like such in a horrifyingly evil way. But I feel like they ramped it up. It took them a minute to, like, hire people, but they hired a lot of people really quickly, and they have not even done with the first year, and it feels like they have quickly ramped up to getting to a really worrying point after this designation has come out. I don't know. Sadly, I guess it is sort of all speculation, sort of, at the moment.
No, that's
at least
an important point.
For it. Yeah.
Just as a reporter, I find myself often asking also, like, how do I know what is going to happen or what to take seriously versus what is his blathering? I hope I've laid out the case for why I think the NSPM-7 is a lot more serious than some of the other things. 2 days prior to that, he did an order on Antifa designating them domestic terrorist organizations. I took that a lot less seriously for various reasons, but I think people got confused between the two and conflated them. I saw a lot of reporting saying, there's no law for designation of domestic terrorist groups. And that has been a really irritating talking point because
sir, that is illegal. It's like,
right. So basically they're right in the sense that you can't easily charge someone with that. Like, you can't put them on the State Department's foreign terrorist organization watch list if they're an American. However, you can still investigate things as terrorism, even if you don't bring those charges. So again, I'm trying to warn people about the continuum of effects that they can bring about by investigating things and looking, and whatever they find, they don't have to charge you with terrorism. They can find whatever they want to find. The point is, now they're able to open these investigations in the first place.
That's that worries the fuck out of me, especially because I had Antifa in one of my earliest screen names on Twitter that I know people have posted screenshots of. So it's like, I really hope this is all just gonna be fine, because they might try to say maybe I'm Antifa's girlfriend. I don't know.
You made a good point about the differences between the first administration and the second, because what's the old saying, the best predictor of future behavior is past. That may be true, but that's not the case with the Trump administration 1 and 2. The principal figures in his national security appointments are radically different. I mean, the so-called adults in the room from the first term, that is not the case here. He's got Pam Bondi. He has Pam Bondi, who's the attorney general, very powerful figure, much more powerful than the FBI director. And you saw Trump just accidentally post a message he meant to send to her, just saying, hey, go after these guys. So there's clearly and in testimony to Congress last week, they asked her, they're like, have you had private conversation with the president? Which there's supposed to be a wall between the attorney general and president. And she just declined to comment, which is like, obviously they're liaising all the time. And then you've got Kash Patel as the FBI director. You have Dan Bongino as the deputy FBI director. You have Kristi Noem, who said this week that they had captured the girlfriend of the founder of Antifa or something like that.
Insane.
So it's like way different group than the first term.
Do we know who this person is yet? The girlfriend of it, the Antifa's girlfriend? Who is
no, this is what's so funny. So this is what's so funny.
Fabrication, right?
They asked her. She said, I think they asked her, and she either didn't say who it was or said they couldn't say because we're exploiting her information to map out the network. So there's some like Ahmed Chalabi somewhere, but like American Antifa coded, that they're talking to, and is probably stringing them along with this whole thing that you know. And it's like,
and see if that's like all they got. If like this is the type of shit, like if this is going to be what the extent of this is, it's like, all right, I'm not that worried, because clearly they're way dumber than I realize if they think that this is like even a connection. But I was gonna say that, like, strangely, the most bleakly funny thing I realized a couple of weeks ago about this Trump administration compared to the first is when, you don't hear Trump talking a lot about the deep state anymore. And I made the realization Trump was like kind of low key right that the deep state was sabotaging him in his first term. They were just people in his own administration. It was like the so-called adults in the room, the establishment Republicans that were like stealing documents off of his desk. I think that was like Stephen Mnuchin and everything. We're like
you
kind of like
deep state,
stringing
them
along.
Fake friends.
Yeah. That's why he got rid of them. I'm surprised he hasn't thrown them in jail yet. But like he was kind of, I'm not saying like credit to him. It's not a good thing, but he kind of was like correct about there being a deep state. Now he has these true like freak believers that are all surrounding him, like the Kash Patels of the administration now.
Yeah, no, that's an astute point. I would say, in fairness, there's sometimes that he did stuff that I thought was constructive, like trying to get out of Syria, for instance. And I've talked to some of the people involved and how that would have been rolled out. And they described how the Pentagon brass played all kinds of paperwork games to slow down his ability to do that. And, that's not good. And so there is something there. Unfortunately, it sounds like his definition of deep state is kind of just like the reality show contestants like Comey that populated. Do you know what I mean? It's like so personal. Like he doesn't seem interested in the institution.
Like, sue and put in jail now.
Right. And it's like, well, okay, that I guess he was the guy in charge.
Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah, it's all so dated. I hear these names. He's like, and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and it just feels like a blast from the past. It's like so irrelevant today, but he's still clearly still thinking about them.
That's why I think he's like his brain's a little low key cooked. And like I don't know if anyone can really prove this, but when he talks about there's fires in Portland, everything's on fire, buildings are burning down, I wouldn't be surprised. There's like potentially maybe Stephen Miller is showing him videos from like 2020, but there's a potential because I'm sure you saw that Trump reposted the video of him talking about the med beds coming to America. Like there's just like a good chance that people in his administration, I feel like, are showing him AI videos of. I was going to say
that. Yeah. Can you just imagine him? Like my boomer uncle who posts this picture. He's like, wow, look at this beautiful new church that they built in, I don't remember where it was. And it was like, it looked like you were playing Civ 4 or something. It was like some huge, or like Sim City. It was like, no way that and he was like, he's just like an average guy. Like he's not like, I wouldn't say he's dumb or anything. So that means like every boomer is watching this stuff and just like believing X percentage of it, including the president.
Yeah.
Republicans, I don't remember who all did it, but like elected officials were like reposting images of like South America in 2017 recently and saying that was Portland. Did you guys see that report?
No.
Like they're completely just lying and they're using it in like releases and stuff like that.
Right. So this is going to be a magnifier on the tendencies that already existed. Do you remember during George Floyd where it was like clear that your conservative relatives thought that they thought the whole city had been like razed to the ground, like not realizing it was like a Burger King or like a specific.
I think. Yeah. No, there was that tendency to.
Seattle was CHOP, where you had to say pronouns and people if you like white people were getting whipped or whatever. Like,
Well, that's been the most astonishing part of reporting on this, and actually talking to the people that have to act sometimes as subordinates to Trump within the national security apparatus, is like again and again where my analytical judgment proves wrong, where I found it to be wrong, is thinking, oh, this must just be some cynical grifting line they're saying, and then getting closer to it and realizing, holy shit, these guys really believe this stuff.
Yeah, like you're talking about like the designation of like terrorism and believing that Antifa cells are like everywhere and they just have to like route them out, like that sort of belief about the country.
Yeah. So there's a psychological dimension to this that I don't think the left appreciates, which is that after Charlie Kirk was killed, that was kind of like MAGA's 9/11. Like I'm not even trying to be like,
no, you're right. Yeah.
Like, and if you think about it, they were all personal friends with him. And as has been described to me by people that are interface with these guys, Trump himself has some PTSD over the assassination attempt, as I imagine anyone would. And so they're all looking at this and saying, oh my God, this prominent guy who, half of them are podcasters too. He's like an influencer. They're looking at it, they're like, well, I could be next. So like they really think that they have to, it's like 9/11. Like you go back and you look at some of these ridiculous we were describing before the interview. I mentioned how there was some guy who took the the Pentagon for a ride by saying, oh, I can decode secret Al-Qaeda messages in Al Jazeera headlines. Like all that stuff is very funny, but it's like the psychological moment, people were so scared that they wanted to believe anything to be like, oh my God, I have to protect myself. And I think that's kind of where the Trump administration is at right now.
You can kind of see it, like, especially on Trump's face, specifically, like literally. I don't know if you guys remember this, but when Aiden Ross gave him the Cybertruck with the picture of him with like blood on his face, you can see like he's looking at this and he's not having a fun time seeing this.
No, it's like that image of him standing up became iconic. But like, if that was you, do you really want to see you right after you were shot with blood on your face? Like, that's crazy. I cannot believe Aiden Ross. Funny thing about that, we have never seen that Cybertruck since.
No.
They like bro threw it in the dumpster.
Immediately.
Yeah. God, no, that was, I totally forgot about that Cybertruck. Jesus Christ.
I have a kind of specific to you question, Ken. One of the lines in there was like, it codifies doxing specifically as like an act of terrorism now. How do you, especially as an independent journalist, feel that's going to affect you, or journalists in general, journalism?
I was affected very early on by exactly this. When I got banned on Twitter permanently at the time, when I published the JD Vance dossier. Do you remember this? It was the vetting document when they were looking at who they wanted vice president to be before they picked Vance. So that was such a strange episode because I knew from my friends at the major outlets that they all had a copy of this and nobody wanted to publish it. And I looked at it and I thought, well, there are edge cases for sure. But to me, it's like just a list of things Trump formal positions that you can go online and verify are true. None of it was like we're claiming inside information or anything. So I thought this is such a obviously newsworthy document. So I published it, and in it contained it was like maybe like 90 pages long or something. And somewhere in it was the vice president's residence. Which my view on that is that like a public figure, like you can find that's for sale anywhere. You could find that. It's not a question where he is, but in any case, it was regarded
for anybody to find that on anybody. By the way, if you own property, that's public information in most cases.
This is all sold publicly. I know because I buy it to be able to investigate things. You know, and so we're supposed to pretend like suddenly that isn't the reality, and we need to not put this out there. But so I published it, and then it became this whole thing where it was like these are assassination coordinates, and you're playing a violent. The definition of violence is like rapidly expanding. Like it's now just words, you know what I mean?
The way that they talk about violence is if they disagree with, if people disagree with them, that's violent. If you agree, it's not violent. Most of these protests, like this administration's ICE protests are very much like, it's just mostly just standing outside these facilities, mostly just standing there protesting with signs. And in a lot of cases like Portland, like dancing in a frog suit and shit. It's like, that's not violent. And it's also something that's bothered me for years is they'll talk about like, oh, but they like graffitied the building. It's like, that's not violence though. You can't be violent to an inanimate object. You can't be violent to a building. That's not how that works. That's not what that means. That's what they want it to mean.
Yeah, when he designated Antifa, I thought to myself, okay, like how do we, in his point of view, like obviously Antifa doesn't really exist. And ironically, the first top official to say that was his pick for FBI director, Chris Wray, in 2020. He's like, yeah, it's just an idea. It's not really a thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, just imagining what they're probably picturing when they think that, which is probably some guy that breaks a window or something and does an anarchy sign or something. It's like, I thought of that and it's like, have they literally killed anyone? It's just like the worst you could say is like setting Teslas on fire. And it's just like, just so out of proportion to what even from there, I'm trying to be empathetic here and be like, how would they see it? And it's like, what? It's just so out of touch with how I guess we've had a couple of these high profile assassinations and I've done stories on them. And when I look into it, it's like much less politically driven than you would think. So I wonder how much is just them sitting around hotboxing their own like right wing commentators. And then they start believing that stuff because they're just in this cocoon of like people that agree with them about everything.
Yeah. I mean, like this administration, especially with like how Twitter is these days, have created the ultimate echo chamber.
Totally.
It's presidency ruled via social media echo chamber. And these are the results. And I do think like, I think they believe a lot of these things, but I do think they're trying to do power grabs. Like, I don't think like that's overplaying it to be like, they want to like I don't know. Maybe they don't want another election to happen. Trump said that you'll never have to vote again. They have like made these comments and seem to be taking steps in order to maybe not like end elections, but like, sort of do like a Russia type situation where it's like, yeah, we have elections. Yeah, we everyone votes. And it's like, I guess I just, I think that's the concern, is that they are taking these actual very explicit steps for these like really scary power grabs. And if not that, to try to scare people. And that's what's a little terrifying in some of these recent rulings and, or I guess executive orders and this designation. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive that they believe their own BS, and then they're also trying to take full advantage of any pretext to expand power as much as they can. And if we're honest, I think a lot of administrations do that. I mean, I mentioned 9/11, but anytime they can expand, I mean, it's not just the people that sit in the White House too. These as institutions are always looking to expand their remit, and they have to go to Congress and say, hey, we really need funding to prevent this new threat. And to the extent that they can portray something as some growing new threat, then that allows them to say, hey, spend money on this rather than a new hospital. And that's kind of where we find ourselves, I think.
Something I've been thinking about, and you've been making this point a lot, and I kind of want to just like, maybe like, why are the biggest media organizations like the New York Times, and like, why is no one talking about this like really real threat of the NSPM-7? There very few have, even still to this day. And I mean, this is like 2 weeks after this came out. Many have not.
There's been like one story in Reuters, I think, is like the only like investigative look at it. So I think there's a couple dimensions. One is just how narcissistic Washington DC media. I lived there for several years, and there's just, like we were saying before, there's the ideological cocoon of, oh my God, like you go to bars when there's like the shutdown, it'd be like the shutdown shandy. Like, don't you want this? Like, everything is branded around that little world. And I mean, some of that is human, but like in the case of, I've been complaining about how much more coverage James Comey's indictment has gotten than NSPM-7 or than anything else. Some of it is just like, these are the same way that these are the reality show figures that populate Trump's imagination. That's true of Washington too. Yeah. Because he was the director for 7 years or whatever it was. And these are the, when you look at coverage, how often do you find that you've learned about kind of the system and the big picture versus this person said this, or like, you see it on YouTube with thumbnails. It's like, so-and-so destroys so-and-so. It's like this personality driven, superficial. And I think Washington is really prone to that. So I think that's part of it. Or Letitia James, I made this point. These guys have the best lawyers on earth. I'm not particularly worried, or even if something unfair happened, there's one guy versus a system that is expanding and that like, they don't say anything about.
Ultimately, I do think those two in particular will be fine. Like, I feel like something we've seen a lot of this administration as well is Donald Trump abusing the court systems and like lawsuits to try to just like drag shit out as long as possible to try to like bankrupt people and organizations.
Tactic,
yeah, exactly. Trump's been doing that since day one, since he became the president, again, of just doing that to all sorts of, I mean, he did that to the New York Times, or at least, or I think he filed that, but like that's his strategy. And I think that's what he's like kind of trying to do against Comey and Letitia James. But
yeah, so it's partly
it just seems like there's a lot of like, people are scared. Yeah.
Yeah. It's partly, I think media always has, or I don't know, I guess I would say the establishment always has an incentive to say like, okay, everyone calm down, like go home. Like you don't need to get too involved in politics. Things are going to be all right. And to the extent that I've seen a lot of expert commentary on it, that mixes with a lack of just literacy on national security. So for example, not knowing the difference between a presidential memorandum and an executive order, there were like serious news outlets. C-SPAN was like, they've signed the new executive order. I've seen testimony in Congress. I've seen testimony in Congress by senators mischaracterize it as an executive order. So they just don't know. And part of it is because if the New York Times hasn't covered it and given it the kind of billing that they have, some of these personality driven stories I'm talking about, the sad reality is people in Congress, that's all they're reading. Maybe they watch cable news and things, but like they don't have the information diet that like a regular person or I guess we're not regular people, but like
we're abnormally probably tuned in and weird with all of our. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But if you're just going off the Times, they haven't seen it, then they don't know to say anything about this stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to the rot in DC. that exists and causes them to only care about stuff that affects each other.
Ken, on this show, we have a propensity to end on a sort of a dour note from time to time. So as we begin to round home, I have a couple of questions, hopefully, that will lead us into some brighter spots. So to start this off, who are you seeing out there that's like asking the right questions? Who should, like, if to our listeners who are following this, politicians, other journalists, colleagues of yours, or content creators, anybody who's talking about this that they should be following and who's asking the right questions?
There's a journalist by the name of Ken Klippenstein who runs the newsletter. You guys can check out.
We'll put your newsletter in the show notes. Yeah.
I think that national security is such an abstruse issue that I think a lot of the activist groups that I might appreciate their other work, they don't really look at it because it's just complicated, like how I had to explain what a national security memorandum does. So on this specific issue, I haven't really seen. There's been a lot of like indie media like you guys having me on, and it's interesting. There's enormous interest in this question. The story itself did very well. Like there's this very cynical idea, particularly in media, that it's like, oh, the public is dumb. They don't want this heady stuff. They want entertainment. And it's not, I've never seen that to be true. Like the reason I'm able to survive independently is because there's enough of an audience for this stuff.
I think people just want to be taken seriously. Like people want to be treated like adults. And you see that manifest in, people have problems, I think, with, I haven't dug too deep with Graham Plattner in Maine. But the reason he's surging in that state is because he's treating his constituents or maybe future constituents as adults with real concerns. And I think, the media overall doesn't do that.
Totally. I hate to say this, but I have to give credit where it's due. Senator Alyssa Slotkin actually had some good questions about this of all people. And she's virtually the only one in Congress that has said anything about this other than Ro Khanna. He's been excellent on this.
Yeah, and then Jayapal from Washington. She's not my representative, but you mentioned her in your piece too, I think.
Yep. She and Congressman Mark Pocan of the Progressive Caucus, they're circulating records trying to draw attention to this. So there's definitely some attention. Slotkin's questions were a little bit chilling because she's such an establishment figure that it's like, if someone like that is worried about this, I mean, she's said on record, I'm fine with you targeting these cartel boats. We just don't want it to be secret. So it's like, she doesn't care about this substance. It's just the secrecy about it. And so
you have to follow the rules about extraditional murder. Yeah.
A great summary. Everything that's wrong with Washington is like the paperwork for DACA was out of order. So we need to get that chronologically. God damn. But she at least, and so to me, it's like even more concerning that someone like that is worried about this. And she said in a speech on the Senate floor a couple of days ago that she believes that this is leading to a domestic terrorism watch list, which I understand is happening and I've reported on, like we talked about at the beginning of this interview. And again, like this is like Chuck Schumer's protege saying this. This is not like some activist person that's always raising red flags about everything. It's like this person probably knows things that the rest of us don't.
Yeah.
And that should worry everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the good news is we'll all be on that domestic terrorism list together.
It's going to be that could be
kind of fun.
Yeah. Safety in numbers, right?
Yeah, they can't get us all.
A big, beautiful list. I guess my sense of this, Ken, is there are so many aspects of this that are so just flagrantly fucking illegal or just out of bounds. So there's going to be obviously pushback on this. What bright spots or what hope do you think there is in fighting back on this? Is this going to be handled litigation? Is there like lawsuits? How might our country kind of push back on this?
I have a feeling that if people just saw some of these indicators, it would be such a laughing stock that, and if you could frame it in a clever way. So for example, we were talking about the non-traditional families point. I mean, that's like every bachelor who voted for Trump, like single young white guy under 30. Do you know what I mean? Like if you could just share, like spread that, I mean, I don't think it's such a different world to imagine Joe Rogan being like, "Hey, Jamie, you see this? Like, isn't this us? Is this us?" Like, and then a bazillion people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're so far from that. And if that happens, one thing we've seen the administration be very responsive to is that they're getting roasted by all of these guys on social media, and this just has so much of a laugh factor to it because it's so absurd, right? That I could see something like that happening if the major media started talking about it at all.
No, I encourage anyone listening to this, I encourage you to look at the full list. I think there was 12 different like different indicators, and it's genuinely laughable. Like it's scary, but it's like, come on, man. Like this is going to get caught up. Like people were making Twitter jokes about every one of these topics like 10 years ago at this point. Yeah. Like it's ridiculous the things that they put on here.
Okay. My last question for you, and June, you may have some more, but is there anything that we didn't ask or touch on this that you just want our listeners to take away from all this?
I would say a particular concern is the growth of the watch list. I mean, it is a list whose criteria we have no idea what it is because it's classified. The people on it is something that's classified. I mean, I can't really. Part of the irony in all of this is how much this is like something that you would think a figure like Alex Jones would have like been worried about 5 or 10 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, this is like on its face.
Alex Jones is like the biggest fucking cuck in the world. It's ridiculous. He's lost. I mean, he's such a fraud, obviously.
Yeah,
well,
it's
they're
just
setting
like
up infrastructure. Like the Republicans, like when they lose the presidency, and Obama too gets a hold of this, infrastructure. Maybe that's a talking point to give to your conservative uncles or whatever. Like they can't hang on forever.
That's
right?
a really important point. The same way that I was complaining earlier about how our media treats this stuff as a reality show. There is a permanent bureaucracy that exists that will inherit these powers. And as if it's anything like 9/11, maybe some things around the edges are reformed, but the basic essence of it is preserved. And that should be the major concern. I wish people cared about stuff beyond just whoever sat in the Oval Office, because they inherit things. And I mean, we've seen this time and again when, federal authorities expanded, it doesn't look like it's ever clawed back. So that should be put into account.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden expanded a lot on like different, I think like Homeland Security, like surveillance type shit in his term. And there was a lot of people, like probably all of us, that were like, this is like really bad because like, what if Donald Trump wins again? Like he can quite literally use this against all of us. Yeah, and it's like that's kind of what's happening. And
and
no one really
top
thinks
Democrats
term.
Yeah, you've seen top Democrats say, "Hey, you better watch out. Like this is going to come back and bite you." And on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it's hard to imagine Democrats actually retaliating. But if they did, it's a loss on two fronts, not just because of civil liberties concerns generally, but the opportunity cost of having your government, if the next Democrat is basically like, say, Gavin Newsom, and he's like Trump in reverse, doing all this epic Trump stuff, but to the Republicans.
It's just a pure sociopath.
That is like, think of the opportunity cost of all the political capital and governmental time spent on that instead of healthcare or housing or whatever else it is that we want to talk about. That is the real crime, I think, of the national security system that we have, that we throw so much money at it and get so, and because of that, don't fund other things.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think something I do want to maybe emphasize as well. And like, I'm not saying this, I've said this before on online, and people were like, oh, so you want everyone to like be scared and like not be bold and like cower in this administration. And I think something that I think is like very important to remember is think about long-term like survivability. Like think strategically about what you say online, especially because we know that a lot of these people in this administration are probably going to start surveilling
be careful
all of
what
us.
You say online, it got you in trouble. Just saying that got you in trouble.
Yeah, like I'm saying like like don't say things that will get a knock at your door. Like that's all I'm saying. Like you can say I say all sorts of crazy shit. I used to say a lot more crazy shit, but I think just like think about survivability. Think about when you are saying things online, think strategically. I think that's a very important thing. Think about just how Yeah, strategically. I think that's just like what I mean when I talk about when you like say shit online.
Yeah, I'd say this administration takes a very broad interpretation of what, constitutional scholars call true threats. That is imminent, serious threats with specifics that could be construed as something that could lead to an actual attack. So I'd be careful around that. But like you're saying, I would also encourage people, don't self-censor outside of that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because they're hoping that you're going to overreact like that and just be like, I shouldn't say this because I don't want to blah, blah, blah. Outside of true threats,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ken, where can our listeners support you?
I'm at kenklippenstein.com and I run a humble newsletter.
One of my favorite long running bits on Twitter is you plugging your own newsletter for like the last what was that, like 4 years now, like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
That's always whenever I see that on Twitter, I'm like, oh, Ken. Yeah.
I did that to Congressman Khanna when he announced he had a statement, and it's actually a good statement. He said, I started my career opposing the Patriot Act, and he said, this is a greater threat than that was, which was like kind of bone chilling. And I was kind of bummed by that, just thinking like, man, that's so depressing. And I thought, it'd be funny to just be like, Congressman, do you subscribe? And so that's what I replied. Congressman, do you follow newsletter? And he actually replied. He says no, but I am now.
Oh, see, it works. Sometimes doing that sort of like shameless plug works.
Always be grinding, yeah.
Awesome.
Me on my way to the concentration camps, asking soldiers, "Hey, did you guys know about the newsletter?"
Hey, this newsletter is pretty dope. You should check it out.
All my couriers getting posts out.
Someone will smuggle in.
I can protect your identity.
Smuggling in a phone for you to continue it. I think one last plug for us is we plug it every once in a while, but we put up a new All This for $10 or All This for $10 episode on our Patreon. And for the entire length of this is just a reminder, for the entire length of the government shutdown, you can get the Patreon membership half off if you use the coupon code at checkout recession50. So if you want to check out our paywall, see what we've got going on back there, use recession50.
So yeah, support indie media, guys. Really, a big part of the reason I could get any of this out. It's funny, all of these shows like your guys' that have like substantial audiences but aren't like cable or whatever, they're all happy to talk about it. I've been on virtually every kind of lefty one I can think of, including some mainstream sort of center ones. So that to me is part of the solution, is creating a media infrastructure that isn't based in Washington and revolving around their concern set.
Yeah, I mean, something we've talked about this on the show recently is that the right has been so successful in the last decade is because they built a parallel ecosystem, a parallel media ecosystem that has become more powerful than the mainstream media themselves, at least in the right-wing circles. And that has really allowed them to create like very paranoid, just constant day after day, just like end of world scenario, unless the right gets like these crazy conspiracies out there, like, the whole Tylenol thing. So they've been very successful by building up this parallel media. And I do think Ben Collins, the homie, of course, Onion, laid that out recently. And I was like, damn, wait, that's actually like so true. The left sort of needs to build a really strong parallel ecosystem if we want to thrive in the same way, because the media, I think a big problem with the media is that they care more about access than actually telling people the truth a lot of the time.
Yeah. Plus, we can actually sell woke beer and then not ship it like the anti-woke beer. Do you remember that guy, Ken?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard the follow-up, but he just didn't ship his beer out to anybody. His whole Facebook is just full of people like, can I have my $30 six-pack, please? Like, I've been waiting 18 months. It's awesome.
Yeah, if you ever want to dig into some really awesome...
We need to be doing that is what we need to be doing.
I think, we'll work on it. We'll get the wokest beer possible.
Ken, thank you so much for your time. Open invitation anytime there's a story that you want to talk about to come on.
My pleasure, guys. And it was nice meeting you both offline. Yeah. It's weird just seeing people's avatars for years and never having met them.
I know, It's always very nice. It's always a nice surprise. Like, wow, we're kind of insane, but like, everyone's we're just chilling.
We're just in the madhouse together, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Take care. We'll see you guys next week.
All right, have a good weekend, guys. Good night.
See ya.